The radio next door in the kitchen's window that November day of the funeral was tuned to the same station as the one out in the parked car. The women surrounding my grandmother in the kitchen stopped their banter. The men in the yard leaned in, listening. "Who's this Barnett feller?" someone asked. Uncle Benny, the husband of Aunt Lola, my grandfather's no-nonsense hulk of a sister, decided to speak up. A cotton farmer and a contractor, Uncle Benny always wore overalls, even when he deigned to wear a tie as he had that day. He also had on that extra hunting jacket he kept clean in his closet for the occasions when he wasn't hunting. Benny usually hung back from a conversation, slyly grinning at everyone else's slight buffoonery. When he did finally speak, his voice was a surprisingly soft, high-tempered whine. "I bet that Harris fella is kin to old Ross here tootin'," he told the men. "Bet the governor, I can't help but call him that, though. God help us, we just got us a new one. Bet the governor told him to add that extra E to his name so it'll piss off that little kid that can't keep his nose out of my business. If you ask me, they killed the wrong Kennedy. Should have killed both of them while they were at it. We got a deer season, and a duck season, and a quail season. I say we should have a Kennedy season once a year, too." The other men laughed, shook their heads in agreement. A colonel in Ross Barnett's gubernatorial campaign, Uncle Benny was one of Barnett's staunchest supporters. He'd given the clownish and diabolical segregationist Mississippi governor enough money every 4 years to be awarded with the honorific. Old Ross was such a dope, he once began a speech he was giving to the congregation at Beth Israel Temple in Jackson, Mississippi with this: "There's nothing finer than a group of people meeting in true Christian fellowship." "Calm down, Benny," said Earl Johnston, Barnett's ex-press secretary, who was the editor and owner of our local newspaper, the Scott County Times, in which one of the human interest features on the Sessoms orphans had appeared. Under Earl's own byline, he reported that I was the lone child who had known of his mother's impending death, a bit of personal information I had read over and over, wondering why he didn't also report I had been slapped at the time, I was told. Johnson, who I must confess always showed my family a generous concern and was the first to encourage my journalistic leanings, was later exposed as the director of a secret agency, the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission, sort of a cracker KGB, set up within the state government to rat out its citizens and intimidate civil rights workers, sometimes violently, in an attempt to safeguard segregation. "Everything's under control, Benny," Johnson said, getting into his car to back out of the yard, careful not to hit the host of pickups that sat like a herd around the driveway next to the gas pump my granddaddy had installed on the property, so he wouldn't have to drive his Buick the 5 miles into town for a few gallons of Shell. "You heard, Earl," one of the menfolk told Benny. "Earl's in the know. Nothing to worry about. But it's a sad state of affairs, ain't it, when you can't scare the colors no more and get away with it." The other men shook their heads grimly. "The mistake they made was killing them 2 white boys," said Uncle Benny. "That's what made the mess." I stared out at the muffled discussion and wished I could be as oblivious to such words swirling around me as were my little brother and insistent little sister out there tossing pine cones back and forth, frolicking in the pine straw. How had this happened? How had the 3 of us been born into such a confusing brew of chicanery and malevolence and kind-heartedness? Standing there at that window, I tried to focus on my reflection and not on all those men who did not know what to make of me anyway. I practiced looking sad, but I could not take my eyes off them. The men, what kind of creatures are these? If they are a part of me, flesh of my flesh? I listened to the low rumble of their voices discussing the realities of the day. Martin Luther King's numbered hours, LBJ's treachery, a lilt of hatred that, along with organ dirges and the dutiful mournings of the families, tearful womenfolk, furnished the soundtrack of my childhood. Just as my father's sadness changed to fear inside that coach's lounge when he looked into my eyes, I looked into them now reflected before me and watched my own practiced sadness, my own disdain turn to perplexity, to fear. And then it hit me. I do not belong here. I will report back one day all that I have witnessed. I am a spy. Yet where exactly should an exotic such as I hang his hat? Where the hell did I belong? The best I could figure was on one of my favorite television shows, Was My Line. I breathed on the dining room window and signed in, please, KEVINSESSUMS on the misty pane. I closed my eyes and tried with all my shattered heart to hear the cultured clip of the What's My Line host, John Daly, drown out that low rumble of the men outside and the women in the kitchen who were carrying on again about northerners and niggers and how much nutmeg to put in the next month's eggnog. I listened as Daly issued his weekly command to enter and sign in, please, on the chalkboard to see if the panel could guess my line of work. I would whisper into his ear, I am a spy. The panel would be stumped. I would win my $50. Dorothy Kilgallen would call me darling. And Daly, hearing her, would ask me to join them as a permanent fourth member on the panel. I would get to wear a tuxedo like Bennett Cerf, or better yet, an evening gown like Arlene Francis and Miss Kilgallen. I'd sneak into the living room to watch Daly and his elegant panel on Sunday nights at 10:30 when everybody else had gone to bed. The show came on after the CBS late news. I'd lie on my stomach in the dark and watch the images of the warfare up at Ole Miss the year before when that preppy Negro, James Meredith, enrolled and insurgent riots erupted. Federal troops invaded. Deaths ensued. I took it all in as I lay there, getting ready to practice, elongating my vowels in the manner of Arlene, and to shade my laughter with the tone that John Daly employed when displaying his jaded bemusement at one of Bennett Cerf's puns. My favorite segment, when a famous mystery guest was about to walk out and all the panelists put on their blindfolds or eye masks, as Miss Francis once called them, in order not to see who was signing in on the chalkboard. I would clasp each little index finger against my thumbs and form an imaginary mask over my own eyes and pretend I could not see. Sometimes, to the consternation of my grandfather, who always turned in early, my grandmother would watch the show with me. I'll tell you what, sugar. There must have been a run on chins when they give that Kilgallen gal was born, because the Lord sure enough forgot to give her one, you would say, put the hand to her mouth, trying to stifle the sound of her laughter so she wouldn't wake my grandfather. I'd laugh too and describe my imaginary eye mask to her, telling her it was black and velvet and had pearls all around it, just like Arlene's did. But don't you want one like Bennett Cerf's? She would ask. I tell you one thing. I heard her voice now rise above the winded radio's din and awaken me from my latest daydream of a What's My Line live. I just sure hope there ain't no kisses in heaven. Hush, George. Oh, just don't you want to hear who they called? Asked Aunt Vina May, turning up the radio. If you ask me, and we were discussing this in my women's 60 and over Sunday school class, those civil rights boys were just looking for trouble coming down here, like like they were where they don't belong, got what they deserve. This is a sign from God that they should mind their own business. I know Cecil Price. I know Sheriff Rainey, she said, mentioning the two Neshoba County law enforcement officers who everybody was saying either covered up the crime or helped commit it. They're hicks, but they're not murderers. Of course, according to everybody else in this day and age and no count country, we're all hicks in Mississippi. Some of us just dress better than others. Vita Mae, will you hush up about all these civil rights? I've had it up to here with civil rights, said my grandmother, who was starting to cry again. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but had the lungs of a larger one. I once found hidden in my grandfather's closet an old 1920s photo of Vina Mae and my grandmother and all their bobbed hair and bangs, flapper glory. And Vina Mae, always more voluptuous than her little sister, had a Dita Barra bearing about her as she posed for the camera. My tiny grandmother was more Gloria Swanson, all cold eyes and bony allure. I buried Nan today, she said, her voice gurgling for air up through her tears. I buried my baby. I'm sorry, Joyce, I know you did, said Vina Mae. Oh, where's Lyle? She asked, mentioning my grandfather's name. He should be here tending to you. I'm running out of hankies. Oh, he got mad at me for getting on him for eating that cold clabber and crumbled up cornbread he loves so much and all this food I brought over. I told him he was rude. He was insulting the women. He just started to cry and headed out back yonder. He'd been crying today more than me. I put down my carnation milk on the windowsill and stuck my new rabbit's foot in my pocket. I pinched each of my index fingers against my thumbs and formed my imaginary what's my line mask atop my eyes. I pranced through the dining room and into the kitchen. Where's that carnation, Kevin? I just poured myself some more coffee, said Vina Mae. I ignored her and headed for the kitchen door. Don't you know to speak when you are spoken to, boy? You and Lyle are going to have some trouble with this one, she told my grandmother, who was now sniffling. Oh, he don't see you, Vina Mae. He's got his highfalutin mask on, said my grandmother. Call him Arlene, and you might get an answer out of him. And Vina Mae cocked an eyebrow. He's playing Arlene, said my grandmother. If you want that carnation, you gotta call him Arlene. I won't do no such thing, said Vina Mae. I think I have seen it or I sworn it. Who the Samuel is Arlene? Oh, that ugly woman that makes herself pretty on Sunday nights after all them lies on the late CBS News, said my grandmother, wiping her nose. Arlene Francis? Asked Vina Mae. She put her hand to her chunky necklace. She's a Jew. At least that's what I hear tell. I slammed the door in Vina Mae's face. I went looking for my granddaddy.